Welcome to Empowered Kids TV Village Talk. I am so excited to have you here. You're here because you know that every family has the potential to be great, and you're willing to push the boundaries of your mindset so that you can create the family of your dreams. Today, we welcome back the amazing Carole Downing. Carole, welcome back to the village.
Thanks so much. It's always so great to be here.
I'm just going to remind some of you that are new. If you haven't seen Carole before, be sure to check out our previous episodes. And I just want to introduce you to her because she is just fabulous. Carole is a certified parenting coach who is committed to supporting parents in bringing alive a sense of joy and deep connection with their children. With a background in both nursing and psychology, she combines her professional and personal experience to assist clients in navigating challenges by embracing the process of growth and transformation. She is also a certified re-entry practitioner and specializes in working with parents who have lost a spouse or transitioning to single parenting after divorce. She loves working with parents and believes that everyone has the capacity to experience the qualities of balance, peace, and playfulness. And if you've seen it, you'll know I love that playfulness is in there with regards to parenting. You can check out Carole at cmdowning.com. Okay, Carole, we've got a really tough question for you today.
Oh, good. All right, let's dive in.
This question comes from Roxanne, and Roxanne writes, I'm looking for some guidance, please. I found my son watching inappropriate videos on YouTube this afternoon on his tablet. He's watched YouTube videos for a while, but he usually do this with computer games. He likes to play. When I searched his device, I can see that he's searched for sex and watched some of those videos that have come up. I'm mortified and upset. He knows he's done wrong and has apologized and begged me not to tell anyone. I've banned him from using YouTube, but I'm unsure what else, if anything, to do. I've asked him what the reason that he searched for that was, and he says he doesn't know. And I'm just going to switch to the next page. I'm sorry, my fingers are stuck. He's adamant that no one has planted the idea in his head, though I'm not certain. I believe that as surely the idea must have come from somewhere. What do you think I should do? That's really tough.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different pieces in there, and I guess I just want to say to begin with, I love this question because I think that it's something that several things we don't talk about a lot are sexuality in our kids, natural sexuality, and I don't want to generalize, but I think many of us who are parenting now come from families in which sexuality wasn't talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When we were growing up, and so it's kind of like we jump into, so many times in parenting, we jump into it as a job that we've had no training for, right? Other than what we've experienced as children. And so especially with this question, we talk about sexual identity, with sexuality, and we combine that with, parenting in a digital age where kids have access to so much earlier, that, it can be really challenging to feel okay even asking this question. So I love that this question is here in this episode so that we can really just, de-escalate it and talk about it as just something that's absolutely and perfectly normal.
I love it. And I think what I love about this question is that you're absolutely right. This is probably something that a lot of parents face but struggle with coming forward to ask for help. Because you think you should know what to do with this, or you think this is my fault because I've given him access to something. But I really, really love that Roxanne was brave enough to seek help with regards to this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the one thing that's not clear from Roxanne is how old her son is. I'm guessing he's like middle or like early childhood age, like maybe in school right now, like elementary school. I'm guessing that might be the age, but to really acknowledge too that there's this thought from her that I'm hearing that, someone must have showed him this, or someone must have planted this in his head. But I think in that age group, kids start talking, like they start exploring and trying to get ideas. And so if there's not something coming from us at home about how normal it is to be curious about sexuality, to want to know, like if a body is changing, how that might be affecting the child. But if we're not talking about it at home, it's out there. Like kids are talking about it because it's so natural for
Yes.
them to begin to be curious, just as little human beings that have sexual identities. So, as much as we can become comfortable with it, then they will begin to come to us as their resource rather than playground talk, which is always going to have, the wrong terms and can seem so much more. It can get escalated when they're talking just with their peers and not with a trusted adult.
I love that, and I think there's two things to that. One, in that we are meant to be the source of guidance, and especially when it comes to sexuality, we've got a wealth of experience that we can draw from to be able to guide our kids. Their peers don't. And usually what happens when there's discomfort in the home to talk about it is we talk about it on the playground and then we go Google it. And neither of those two are really the areas where you want your kids to be getting guidance, because it's distorted views of sexuality. And when you're planting the first sets of beliefs about self-identity from a sexual perspective, or even an understanding of how love is shared in that way, it's really important to have the adult guidance. So I think it's very important for parents to get to a space where they're comfortable to have this discussion.
Yeah, so wise, right? And and I think the other thing for Roxanne too is, of course, there's that initial reaction that we have as a parent. And then, as we always talk about, like taking a step back, taking a deep breath, acknowledging, like, oh my gosh, what does this bring up in me? And one of the things I learned really early on when my son was young was that what he was usually asking about or curious about in terms of sexuality was actually quite innocent. Right? And then I was making it into something quite huge. And so, really, just whatever they ask, sometimes getting a sense of what are they actually curious about. And so with her son, really acknowledging, it's really normal to be curious. And I don't know if maybe kids are talking about this, but it's normal to be curious. But talking about YouTube as a place that has a lot of different input, that's not really the perfect place for him to go. So acknowledging the normalcy of his curiosity, and then setting limits. She can do that either through setting parental controls or through talking with her son about it's a great opportunity to talk about what's appropriate to engage in on media.
I love that. And the reason I love that is because she clearly mentions that he feels like he's done something wrong. And I think to explore your sense of curiosity, whether it's coming from conversation or from changes in your body, we shouldn't allow kids to label that as wrong.
Right.
We just need to have that guidance to say there are places that you go where you can get information that's uplifting and beneficial, and places that you can go where you can get information that's misleading or probably not placed for your age, because some information is just age appropriate, and you can have that conversation with a child of this age. So I think I love that. Even going back to say, you know what, mommy might have reacted out of a sense of fear or shock, but really, I want to acknowledge that you being curious, there's nothing wrong with it. And because we can then turn that into shame and guilt, and that gets stuck to our beliefs around sexual identity, and that's a combination you don't want to have, because then that's a lifelong something that you then have to deal with.
Right. And I love that you bring that up, the process that happens with shame and guilt when we feel someone else's, and kids are so energetically sensitive, right? Like, even if we don't say it, they can feel like, uh-oh, that was really out of bounds for mom, or mom's super uncomfortable. And, sometimes it's like mom or dad is super uncomfortable. Maybe I should go explore more, right? But that sense of, as soon as we get in that cycle of shame and guilt, then that takes the behavior into a place where they feel like they need to hide that. And then they're not really going to begin to open up to us. And especially as a young child, giving them, again, the acknowledgement of the normalcy so that we can either connect to them through books or through conversations, or if we really feel uncomfortable, finding someone in our life who does have the comfort to talk with them.
Yeah. There's one other thing that's practical that I wanted to talk to Roseanne about, and that's really about just putting some security in place, some internet security. There's lots you can do through your internet service provider to limit stuff. On YouTube, you can also create accounts that your kids can use and have restricted views so that it would only show kid-friendly content. There's also YouTube for Kids that would allow them to see some of their gaming videos but not adult content. So there's a few things that she can put in place, not to control, but to allow a safe space for her kids to feel comfortable to explore. And I think that goes hand in hand with having the conversation to say, ask me. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're curious about, ask me. And let me be the one to kind of introduce you to stuff in a way that's uplifting for you. Yeah.
So wise. And I think, one of the points I feel with that is, all the things that we can set, with internet controls and whatnot, with limits, we can think of that as kind of the scaffolding that keeps them safe. But then it's their connection with us that really, when that scaffolding is gone, maybe they're at a friend's house.
Yes.
How do we teach them what's appropriate, what fits into our family values of what we watch,
Yes.
And talking, sadly enough, talking about pornography at very young ages because kids can access it on their phones. And so talking about what to do if a friend shows them something inappropriate on their phone.
Yes.
At school. So opening the conversation. And one last thing I would say about this is, I found with my boy, and a colleague of mine taught me this, is talking in the car is fabulous for topics like this that we feel uncomfortable about. Like we're in the backseat, then we're in the front, we're driving, everybody's doing something else, but the conversation just flows. Like for me, if I sit my boy down and try to talk to him in the eye, especially about something that he's feeling uncomfortable with, like just nothing gets said.
Yes.
Whereas if we created a space where we're walking or playing or right next to them, it's much easier.
I love it. I love car conversations. We have a lot of connection time in our car as well. I just wanted to touch on that security a bit more, because I know a lot of parents, even with regards to screen time, not just content, but screen time, they use it as an enforce and control. You're only allowed an hour. I think what's really beneficial is to bring your kids into the conversation of why they should have it. So we have restricted access, but my kids can turn it on and off. So it's not that it's enforced, but they understand. We've had the conversation that once you see something, you can't unsee it. Yeah, you can't unsee it. And some things are age appropriate, and we allow them to explore that by thinking of some of the shows that they're now allowed to watch that their younger cousins are not allowed to watch. And why. And they are very protective of their younger cousins, so they will say, no, this will scare them, they'll have nightmares, they shouldn't watch that. And so they understand that from that perspective, that there are things that are just age appropriate, that it's not that we're trying to hide it from you, it's that your brain is probably just not at the stage where you can process that and still feel happy, like everything's normal. It might throw some things off you and throw you off balance. And so they actually put the restriction on themselves as a way of protecting themselves, and not mommy and daddy saying, well, you have to have this on there. And I think that's really when you have the conversation, as you've said before, to kind of say, look, this is normal, it's fine to be curious, there's no shame and there's no guilt about this. Let's just figure out how we can explore this in a safe way. Then kids are happy for the guidelines and for the things that we have available as tools to keep us safe.
Right. So such wisdom there, and it really does speak to finding resources in books, and even resources on there might be little videos that are really appropriate. And so finding those resources. And I love always going back to the why when we set a limit or a parental control or whatever it is, that if our child understands the why behind the limit, they're much more willing to accept it. And then, as you said, they tend to teach it or live it in a way. And that's what we want for our children, right? Is for them to live into the limits and guidelines that we set, because there's a why behind them.
I'm loving this conversation, and I'm going to try to, we've given some really key tips here to Roxanne, and I'm going to try to go back to them. The first thing is to probably take a deep breath after this and acknowledge, okay, this threw me off balance. Yeah, I wasn't prepared for this, wasn't ready to have these conversations, but here I am. And then to try again. I think opening up and making her son feel like it's normal to be curious, but also being curious herself, as you've mentioned before, to see exactly what is he looking for. Because sometimes we're thinking it's the whole 9 yards when it's just it's just the beginning of the story, right? So just bringing curiosity, and really trying to understand from his perspective, what is he looking for. Working to remove guilt and shame. There should be no guilt and shame around trying to explore and understand our bodies and the way we fit into the world. So just removing that and allowing him to understand that this is a natural process, and you're his guide. You're his guide, so he's free to come to you to ask you anything he needs so that you can help him explore in a safe way. Explore internet security, but explore it together as a team. Explore it in a way where you understand why you have boundaries and how to use those boundaries, and not something like you're enforcing as a big stick. And really find a fun space to talk, sometimes for difficult conversations, because this might not just be uncomfortable for you, it might also be uncomfortable for him. So find a fun space, whether it's in the car or for when you go on a walk, sometimes even cooking in the kitchen when you're next to each other but not looking in each other's eyes. Those are all great spaces, and you can find your own what works for you that will allow you both to feel comfortable to explore the topic in more detail. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Carole?
It's such a great wrap up. And I think, the only thing that comes to mind is, for her to also just acknowledge for herself that it does feel awkward, to maybe even share that, to share that with a friend. Like, I have this sense that she feels really like, oh my gosh, my son's watching this, like, maybe some of her own shame and guilt. And so if there's a really close friend that she can share that with, like, oh my gosh, this happens and I don't know what to do, like, just acknowledging that it can feel awkward and to normalize it by sharing it with someone that feels safe as well. And maybe even acknowledging the awkwardness with her son too, so that sometimes I can take the edge off of conversations.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Carole, for joining us in the village. We've absolutely loved having you here and helping answer Roxanne's question.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Nicole.
I want to remind you all to please dive into Carole's work. It will change the way you approach your parenting forever. You can find Carole at cmdowning.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're all about sharing and supporting this village. So if you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your family and friends. And remember, this is a weekly show. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. As we always say in the village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.